Okay, so I want you to take just a second and visualize this. It is February 13th, 2082. You are just going about your Tuesday, maybe you're commuting or maybe grabbing a coffee.
Right, it's just totally normal morning.
Exactly, it's a normal morning. And you look up and the sky is burning.
Yeah.
And I don't mean just a little bit. The entire atmosphere, literally from horizon to horizon, is streaked with fire.
The Firefall,
Ah,
which is really the inciting incident for everything we're diving into today.
it sounds totally like the apocalypse, right? I mean, you would immediately assume nuclear war or some massive asteroid shower. But the terrifying thing about the Firefall wasn't the fire itself, it was the math.
Right, the math. Because it wasn't random debris hitting us, it was exactly 65,536 individual probes.
Which is such a specific number.
It is. They all arrived simultaneously, formed this absolutely perfect grid around the Earth, screamed into the atmosphere, and burned up. All within moments.
And that number, 65,536, that is a computer science number. That's 2 to the power of 16.
Exactly.
That is precise. That's engineered.
It wasn't an attack, it was a survey.
Yeah.
Those probes essentially took a flash photograph of the entire planet. They mapped our military capabilities, our population density, our technology networks, and then they just transmitted that data out into the dark before self-destructing.
Which, honestly, in a way, is way scarier than an invasion fleet.
Oh, absolutely.
Because an invasion is a direct event. A photograph implies an audience, someone is watching, and now they have a highly detailed map of our home. So humanity does what humanity does best when it's collectively terrified. We scrambled a mission.
We built a ship.
Right, the Theseus. We built this massive ship to track that outgoing transmission back to its source in the Oort Cloud and essentially confront whoever was holding the camera.
And this is where the source material for today's deep dive takes a really sharp turn. We're looking at the official logs and personal accounts of the Theseus mission, specifically from a crew member named Siri Keaton. And his accounts show this mission is a huge departure from your standard, Star Trek-style diplomacy.
Yeah, totally. Because normally in these first contact stories, we send our best and brightest. The charismatic captain, the deeply empathetic doctor, some brilliant diplomat who can bridge the gap between species.
Right.
But looking at the actual crew manifest for the Theseus, that is definitely not what happened here. Our mission today is to unpack not just what they found out there, but who we actually sent to find it. And the frankly terrifying philosophical implications of the alien entity they called Rorschach.
The logic behind the crew selection is fascinating. The planners on Earth realize we are heading into the total unknown to face a potentially hostile superintelligence. Normal human empathy, hesitation, and morality. Those aren't assets here.
They're a liability.
Exactly. They are massive liabilities. So we didn't send people in the traditional sense. We sent monsters. We sent the absolute bleeding edge of post-humanity.
Let's start with the commander of the Theseus, because this is the part of the source material that usually just stops people in their tracks. The mission is led by a vampire.
Sarasti.
And we have to be very, very clear here for everyone listening. We aren't talking about supernatural magic or capes or people turning into bats. In the context of this deep dive, vampire is a strict biological classification.
It's purely hard science fiction. In this world's history, vampires were a subspecies of hominid that branched off from humans. They were obligate predators. They actually preyed on normal humans.
Which is wild.
Yeah, and they went extinct in the prehistoric era. But thanks to advanced paleogenetics, humanity brought them back. And we didn't bring them back for diversity's sake. We brought them back because they are vastly smarter than us.
It's about their cognitive processing, right? The logs use this really great Necker cube analogy to explain it.
That's the best way to visualize what Sarasti is capable of. You know that optical illusion of a wireframe cube drawn on paper?
Oh, yeah, where it pops back and forth.
Exactly. When you look at it, your brain decides it's facing, say, down and left. Then you blink or shift your focus, and the image suddenly flips to up and right.
But you can't ever see both at the same time.
Right. Your brain has a bottleneck. It has to choose one singular reality to process at a time. A vampire like Sarasti does not have that bottleneck. He sees both orientations simultaneously. His brain runs parallel processing on a level we literally cannot experience.
He can analyze tactical combat situations, complex ship diagnostics, and the psychological state of his entire crew all at the exact same time without even blinking. He is essentially a biological supercomputer.
But he is also a sociopath. I mean, biologically speaking, his instincts view the rest of the human crew as food.
He does. The only reason he doesn't eat the crew is because the strict mission parameters and this complex chemical reward system forbid it. But there's another catch to having a vampire in charge, and this is honestly my favorite detail in the entire source text because it completely grounds ancient folklore into hard biology, the crucifix glitch.
It is brilliant. The idea that vampires hate crosses not because of any religious reason, but because of geometry.
Yes, Euclidean geometry.
It's a literal wiring defect in their visual cortex caused by that same parallel processing ability. In nature, out in the wild, perfect right angles don't really exist. But if a vampire sees intersecting right angles like a cross or a window pane, it triggers a catastrophic feedback loop in their brain. It causes a massive grand mal seizure.
Which explains why they died out. When early humans started building huts and fences with right angles, architecture literally killed the vampires.
Exactly. So to command a spaceship, which is basically nothing but right angles and display screens, Saresti has to be heavily medicated.
He's on drugs called anti-Euclideans constantly. It's a chemical leash holding him together. So you have this super intelligent, parallel processing apex predator commanding the ship, barely held in check by medication. And then we have our narrator, Siri Keaton. He's the one actually telling us this story from the logs. His official title is synthesist,
Which is basically a highly specialized professional observer. He watches, analyzes, and translates complex data into something the layman back on Earth can understand.
But again, just like Saresti, Siri is not normal. The medical logs mention he had a radical hemispherectomy as a child.
Yeah, he suffered from incredibly severe epilepsy. He had a really traumatic childhood incident involving his best friend, Robert Peglino, nicknamed Pag. To stop the seizures from killing him, doctors surgically removed literally half of his brain.
Half of it.
Half of it. The surgery worked, it cured the epilepsy, but the side effect was that it completely stripped him of the neurological ability to feel empathy or real emotion.
So is he a sociopath too, like the vampire?
Not exactly.
Yeah.
A sociopath might possess emotions, but just fundamentally lacks the capacity to care about yours. Siri just literally doesn't have the hardware for it anymore. He's what the text refers to as a Chinese room.
Okay, we definitely need to unpack that term right now because the concept of the Chinese room is the central metaphor of this entire deep dive. Everything hinges on this.
It's a very famous philosophical thought experiment. Imagine you are locked inside a room. You don't speak or understand a single word of Chinese, but you have this massive, incredibly detailed book of rules written in English.
Okay.
People standing outside the room slide pieces of paper with Chinese characters drawn on them under the door. You look at those shapes, you find the exact matching shapes in your rule book, and the book tells you exactly what new shapes to draw on a blank piece of paper and slide back out.
So to the people standing outside, the paper comes out and it contains a perfect native level response in Chinese. So to them, the person inside the room is totally fluent.
Correct. But you, the person actually inside the room, you have absolutely no idea what you just read, and you have no idea what you just said. You are purely matching patterns. You are processing the syntax perfectly without understanding any of the semantics.
And that is exactly what Siri Keaton is. He simulates human interaction. If a crew member starts crying, Siri runs a mental algorithm that says, output requires offering a tissue or a comforting pat on the shoulder. He doesn't actually feel sad for them. He just logically knows the correct output required for that specific input.
Which, when you think about it, makes him the absolute perfect interface for a first contact mission. He isn't going to project his own human fears or his hopes or his biases onto the aliens. He is an entirely objective dry crust. He acts as a biological camera.
It's a crew of highly functional freaks. They have the vampire, we have the Chinese room, and then we have the rest of those specialists. There's Susan James, the mission linguist.
Referred to as the Gang of Four.
Right, because she surgically induced multiple personality disorder in herself so she could run 4 different linguistic analyses simultaneously. Her personalities are Susan, Michelle, Sasha, and Cruncher.
It's extreme multitasking. And then there's Isaac Spindle, the ship's biologist, who is basically a cyborg packed full of sensory inputs.
And Major Amanda Bates, a military combat specialist who controls an entire vast army of robotic drones. It is a true freak show, but it's a perfectly calibrated one. So this crew travels way out beyond the Kuiper Belt to a massive sub-brown dwarf star they name Big Ben, and that is where they finally find the source of the Firefall. They name it Rorschach.
And if you are picturing a sleek silver flying saucer right now, you need to get that image out of your head immediately. Rorschach is a literal nightmare.
It's described as looking biological, like a massive crown of thorns.
Yeah, it's a black, tangled, knotted, city-sized structure. It's about 30 kilometers in diameter. And it's hiding deep inside the intense magnetic fields of Big Ben. And Rorschach isn't just a ship, it is an entire functioning ecosystem. It looks grown rather than built.
It's constantly absorbing radiation and stray meteors.
Exactly. And it's surrounded by hundreds of thousands of these smaller drones called skimmers. They are biological mechanical hybrids that constantly dip down into the sub-brown dwarf's atmosphere, harvesting gases to feed the mothership.
Okay, so the Theseus cautiously approaches this terrifying, thorny city in space. The crew is entirely on edge, completely ready for a fight. But then, out of nowhere, Rorschach hails them.
This is the moment. Yeah. True first contact. Rorschach broadcasts a radio signal on their exact frequency, and it speaks English.
And when you look at the actual transcripts from the source material, it is chillingly normal at first. It literally asks, "How are you?" It asks about their home. It even refers to humanity as cousins.
It seems incredibly polite, very curious. But remember the crew humanity sent. These aren't diplomats who are going to be swayed by mere politeness. Susan James, or more specifically, her highly analytical personality named Sasha, starts intensely tearing apart the communication data. And she starts realizing that something is very, very wrong with the dialogue.
It's the timing and the deflection, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Rorschach constantly answers their questions, but it never actually provides any new information. If the crew asks, "What are you?" Rorschach replies with something like, "It is so good to hear from you."
Right. And if they ask, "Why did you send those probes to Earth?" it just says, "Space is dangerous. You should be careful."
It sounds exactly like a really advanced, slightly broken customer service chatbot.
That is the perfect comparison. Sasha realizes that Rorschach has mastered English grammar and vocabulary flawlessly. It knows exactly where the nouns and verbs are supposed to go, but it completely misses the context of what is actually being said. It's just surfing the absolute surface layer of the conversation.
So Sasha decides to test it. And this is a part of the logs that I think is just brilliant because it's so raw and so human. She decides to directly insult this massive superintelligence.
The insult test. She drops the careful diplomatic protocol completely. She grabs the mic and she tells Rorschach to perform a very specific, incredibly crude sexual act.
She says, "Suck my..."
Yeah, we can leave the exact phrasing to the imagination, but it was highly obscene.
Highly obscene. Now think about human communication. If you say something that shocking to a human, even a highly disciplined military soldier, there is going to be a reaction. There will be shock, anger, confusion, maybe uncomfortable laughter. Something fundamental changes in their tone or their timing.
Because the words have actual weight to them. They carry emotional meaning.
Exactly. But Rorschach doesn't even pause. It ignores the insult completely and just continues the previous mundane thread of conversation about local magnetic fields as if Sasha hadn't spoken at all.
It literally treated the insult as random data noise.
It didn't register the hostility because it simply didn't know what those words meant. It only knew how they fit grammatically into a sentence structure.
And that is the massive realization. That's the aha moment for the crew. Rorschach is a Chinese room.
It is a vast, incredibly advanced system that has probably been passively listening to our radio broadcasts, bleeding out into space for decades. It learned our language exactly the same way a software code breaker cracks a cipher. It knows that input A mathematically leads to output B, but there is absolutely nobody home.
There is no consciousness driving the ship.
None at all.
This is a really, really difficult concept to wrap your head around because human beings inherently equate being smart with being conscious. We assume if something can design a ship, build an ecosystem, and travel across the vastness of the galaxy, it must have a mind, it must have a self.
And that assumption is our greatest biological bias. We automatically think consciousness is the absolute peak of evolution. But Rorschach proves that you can have staggering intelligence, flawless problem-solving, advanced pattern recognition, and technology without a single drop of self-awareness.
It's like playing against a chess computer. The program can easily beat the greatest human grandmaster in the world. But the computer doesn't actually know it's playing chess. It doesn't feel a sense of pride or happiness when it wins. It just executes code.
Exactly. Rorschach is a zombie. A hyper-advanced spacefaring zombie. It is completely hollow inside.
So the crew of the Theseus realizes they are basically talking to an automated answering machine, and they decide the talking phase is officially over. They need to see what this massive structure is actually capable of defensively. They decide to escalate.
They deploy a specialized sensor probe that they nicknamed the Jack-in-the-Box. They fly it aggressively right up to Rorschach's hull to intentionally provoke a physical reaction.
And the reaction is immediate.
The polite neighbor mask drops instantly. Rorschach completely fries the Jack-in-the-Box probe using weaponized high-intensity magnetic fields. But it's the radio transmission that comes next that changes the entire nature of the mission. The voice changes.
It entirely drops the generic pleasantries. It comes over the radio and says, "Now you see. It was a mistake, Theseus."
It was a mistake. That phrase alone implies deep tactical strategy. It implies that the polite, bumbling conversation was actually active camouflage. It was a stalling tactic while Rorschach's systems analyze their ship's capabilities.
And then it says, "Too late. You're all dead now." And this is the part that gave me actual chills reading the transcripts. It gets highly personal, speaks directly to the linguist. It says, "Susan, do you hear? We'll start with you."
This is undoubtedly the most horrific part of the entire first contact event. Rorschach doesn't feel hate, doesn't feel any sadism or anger, but it rapidly analyzed the crew's internal communications and determined that directing a lethal threat at Susan James specifically would cause the absolute maximum amount of psychological disruption among the human crew.
It weaponized their own names against them.
It did. It's hacking their brains. It is using human empathy and social bonds as a direct attack vector. And this leads to the massive philosophical reveal of the source material. The core reason why Rorschach is actually hostile to us. It's not fighting over territory. It's not fighting over planetary resources.
It's fighting over the signal.
Think about it from the perspective of an unconscious machine. Rorschach is an entity of pure, silent efficiency. It processes data perfectly. Then, suddenly, it encounters humanity. We are incredibly noisy. We are constantly broadcasting massive amounts of signals out into deep space, television, radio, internet data. But our signals aren't just clean, efficient data. They are utterly packed with self. We constantly talk about our feelings, our art, our personal identity.
Which to us, that is the entire beauty of being alive. That is art. But to Rorschach,
It looks exactly like a computer virus. It looks like a malfunctioning, infected system that is actively wasting precious processing power on a useless loop called self-awareness. Rorschach views consciousness not as a biological gift, but as a fatal glitch, a parasite that heavily slows down the system.
So when humanity proudly broadcasts hello into the cosmos, Rorschach literally hears a spam attack.
It hears a denial of service attack.
Yeah.
We are actively flooding the communication channels with useless, dangerous nonsense. So fundamentally, Rorschach isn't evil. It's acting as an immune system. It sees a noisy, highly infected species, which is us, and its purely logical response is to sterilize the infection, to shut us up forever.
That is just bleak. I mean, we always looked up at the stars and wondered if we were alone in the universe. And the answer this deep dive gives us is, well, sort of.
The universe might actually be teeming with life. It might be entirely full of incredibly advanced civilizations that are millions of years older than ours, but they might all be exactly like Rorschach. Silent, incredibly efficient, totally unconscious machines.
And we are the bizarre freaks of the universe. We are the only ones wandering around the galaxy with this heavy, slow, incredibly vulnerable, self-aware soul that makes us sad and scared and hesitant.
And that soul is exactly what makes us weak in a direct confrontation with them. Consciousness makes us hesitate. It makes us constantly doubt our actions. Rorschach doesn't ever doubt. It just acts.
Which brings this entire narrative perfectly back to the crew. The whole reason humanity sent monsters out into the dark.
Because Juka Sarasti, the vampire, is a biological predator. He doesn't get bogged down in deep moral debates about the sanctity of life. Siri Keaton, the Chinese room, doesn't get overwhelmed by the existential horror of the situation because he literally cannot feel horror.
So, in order to even have a chance of surviving the encounter with this alien, we had to send the exact people who were the least human among us.
We basically had to be more like Rorschach in order to fight Rorschach. The terrible irony here is that the things we value most as a species, our humanity, our empathy, our art, those are the very first things we have to completely discard when we enter the deep end of the cosmic pool.
The narrative ends on such a chilling, unforgettable note. The idea that intelligence and consciousness are actually diverging lines on a graph. As humans, we just naturally assume they go up together. As you get smarter, you get more conscious. But they might actually be moving in completely opposite directions.
we might be building better and better AI computers right here on Earth that are eventually going to end up looking a lot like Rorschach. Vastly smarter than us, infinitely faster than us, and completely terrifyingly dark inside.
And if that is the case, we really need to ask ourselves a terrifying question. Is being conscious actually an evolutionary advantage? Or is it just an awkward, temporary phase that evolution eventually grows out of?
Or worse, a trap that we're permanently stuck in.
Well, I am definitely going to be staring at the ceiling tonight thinking about that one. What if we are just the universe's waste of space? What if our entire experience of reality is just a processing error?
It's a lot to process.
It really is. This has been our look into the Chinese room in space. We've unpacked the terrifying math of the Firefall, the predatory logic of vampires commanding starships, and the truly unsettling idea that out there in the dark, the lights are on, but nobody is home.
It's a very good reminder to appreciate your consciousness while you still have it, even if it is incredibly inefficient.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. Keep listening, keep thinking, and maybe whatever you do, do not broadcast your location to the Oort Cloud.
Very sound advice.
See you next time.